What's up, Flaniverse? Wanted to do a little show on the Sunday morning football show again in London. We've got the Vikings at the Browns, technically, but the game again is in London. Should be doesn't seem like it's gonna be a very fun game. If I'm being totally honest with you, does not strike me as the most fun football game. But as a Vikings fan, I am holding out some hope that the Vikings can make this one fun. Maybe make it fun. Also, Dylan Gabriel, first NFL start in this one. Vikings just totally beat up. This is not the Viking squad that I was looking forward to watching all summer. This is a beat up Vikings team, but we got Jordan Addison back, so that's fun. What's going on, Squeak Diesel? Good to have you in chat. We're going to do the usual here. Going to be going position by position: quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight ends, defenses, kickers. I'll take any questions. Build some. I haven't actually entered any contests yet, so I'll enter some contests. Maybe I'll run the Sims a time or two to go through this. To be honest, I have not spent a lot of time on this slate, so I'll be looking at this stuff for the first time now. Obviously, I did last week was Vikings Sunday morning game. Also, I did that whole showdown slate and watched that game to the extent that I was able. I was paying attention to that one, so kind of have an idea of what I need to talk about with the Vikings. The Browns with Dylan Gabriel starting. This will be interesting. I've read some of the coach speak index. I've read the Vikings coach speak index. We'll have to catch up on if there's been anything in the Browns since I last looked, but wanted to get this one out there. Obviously, been a pretty busy day, but let me just pull up the coach speak index from this past week. Oh yeah, Jerry Jeudy out also. We've got that. Sorry, not Cedric Tillman out, not Jerry Jeudy. Apologies. All right, 928. Head coach Kevin Stefanski. I'm just going to read it at the beginning, get it out of the way. I think Quinshon Judkins continues to get better weekly. I think every time he gets a new game plan and a new understanding of what we're doing and some different runs and those types of things, I think he's going to keep getting better. Awesome workload. Yeah, Tillman out for weeks. 29th. Kevin Stefanski. Jerry Jeudy is our guy. He's our best wide receiver. He'll continue to make plays for this team. I have zero doubt about that. And then on the 1st, it was announced we're going to start Dylan Gabriel at quarterback. Joe Flacco will be quarterback 2. So if you're holding out hope for seeing Shadur Sanders in this game, he's still the quarterback 3. So we'll see about that. But we'll start at the top with the Vikings. Carson Wentz projected for 52% flex ownership, 14% captain ownership. Looking at the matchup for Carson Wentz, fifth worst matchup for quarterbacks against Cleveland, so that is not ideal. I guess while I have this up, it's also the 6th worst for quarterbacks against Minnesota. Not a great game environment for the passing games. Two tough matchups here. A little bit tough to get excited about Carson Wentz. Although this has been primarily, it has seemingly been a pass funnel. What was my impression of the Browns defense? I feel like that is what everybody has been calling it. So that's interesting that they actually, from a schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed, has actually been a really tough matchup for quarterbacks. If anybody has any stats on like which teams have allowed the most passing yards, I would be curious if you could throw those at me, because I'm wondering if this is a better matchup than it looks on paper for the Vikings passing game, because I think the Browns have been a little bit of a pass funnel so far this year. It's just not reflected in the schedule adjusted numbers. But generally, I suspect I will be overweight or at least with the field on some of these on the quarterbacks, just because we don't have many great options to spend up for. Maybe not. I guess we do have. We've got running backs on both teams that look really good. You've got both of the Vikings top receivers that you can pay up for. And then Judy's 7,600. So maybe we don't end up overweight on the quarterbacks, especially coming in at 52 and 14 for Carson Wentz does seem a bit much. I suspect I'll be with the field, at least in the flex at captain. I don't know that I get to 14% Wentz. Could be spreads the ball around like last week. Actually spread the ball around quite a bit to Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Then it was, of course, Naylor who scored a touchdown. So I guess that would have been a game where maybe it would have worked out. I don't remember what was the optimal captain last week. It wasn't the Vikings. I think I know that. I think that much. It was not the Vikings because they had a terrible game last week. But generally, if I'm playing Carson Wentz in the captain spot, I want him to be multi-stacked. If I am playing him in the flex, I want him to be at least stacked up. He's not much of a running quarterback at this point in his career. Dylan Gabriel, I was just looking it up, his college stats, because I don't know much about Dylan Gabriel. He's a rookie this year. Just wanted to look up his running stats. Like, is he much of a rusher? Looks like he was kind of similar to like a Joe Burrow. Never got to 400 rushing yards in a season, but had a couple seasons where he rushed for between 300 and 400 yards, which for a college quarterback is kind of a lot because they get attributed negative rushing yards anytime they're sacked. So it's the rushing stats tend to be a little bit down for college quarterbacks. So ultimately, I think he's like a decent runner, but not like an elite. He's not a Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels type. So I do think that Dylan Gabriel, you're going to want to have him stacked up regardless of where you have him in the lineup. If you have him in the captain spot, you probably want him to be multi-stacked. Maybe you could have him single stacked in the captain spot. He is only 8,000, so that helps a little bit, being fairly inexpensive for a quarterback here. Doesn't project very well. Projection of 10.2, 44% flex ownership, 7% captain ownership. Those numbers seem totally fine for his salary. No issue with the Dylan Gabriel play, but I think generally I'm gonna want him at least stacked up. Maybe not necessarily multi-stacked, but at least stacked up regardless of where he is in the lineup. Let's move on to running backs. Take a sip of our Guinness. Anybody watching House of Guinness on Netflix? Just started that this week, and it inspired me to buy a 4-pack of Guinness. So I've got one here. All right. Running backs. Jordan Mason, elite running back, who lost some work last week to Xavier Scott. I think this is he's pretty game script dependent. Actually, let's look at last week for the Vikings. Jordan Mason played 45 snaps to Xavier Scott's 27, had 16 rushing attempts to Xavier Scott's 2, 3 targets on 33.3% route participation. That's kind of promising, a little bit more involved in the passing game than usual. But then Xavier Scott saw 8 targets in that game on 40.7% route participation, the first game without Aaron Jones. So we kind of learned a lot last week about what to expect from the Vikings with Aaron Jones out. I think what I've learned is, in a neutral or leading game script for the Vikings, I think it's just going to be Jordan Mason. I don't expect Xavier Scott to be very involved in a game script where they are ahead or, in a close game. I think it's mostly just going to be Jordan Mason. Xavier Scott, though, we see here that he actually has the ability to pick up, 8 targets in that game. That is a lot. He was very involved once the Vikings were behind in catch-up mode. I bet if we split this out by quarter, or can we do it by half? Let's do it by quarter. It'll be even a higher snap share for Xavier Scott. No, actually, second quarter, Xavier Scott, 62% of snaps. Fourth quarter, 45.5. So totally wrong about that. That's interesting. Yeah, fourth quarter was, Jordan Mason led slightly, even when the Vikings were playing from behind. Third quarter, it was the Jordan Mason show. Second quarter, kind of surprisingly, Xavier Scott took on more of that work. I don't remember exactly how that happened, but again, I do think generally it is going to be Jordan Mason leading the way, Xavier Scott picking up scraps until the Vikings get behind. I suspect it's going to be more Xavier Scott when they need to be passing. I do want to see, let's see. Instead of split, let's look at qualifier. No. Play. Leading, tied, trailing. Trailing. Let's go with that. In a trailing game script, yeah, it was 56.5% Jordan Mason to 43.5% Xavier Scott. Xavier Scott, when trailing, saw all 8 of his targets after the Vikings were down. So it seemed to pick up a little bit more in both of his carries. So didn't really, I guess the Vikings were just down the entire game. We really can't take anything away from this, honestly, because the Vikings were basically just down the entire game. But my expectation, I think it's pretty reasonable to expect that it's going to be Jordan Mason is the clear bell cow going forward, unless the Vikings get behind, then I would guess they lean on Xavier Scott a bit. So ultimately, I think Jordan Mason at 10,400, 33% flex ownership, 15% captain ownership looks okay. Looks like actually a pretty strong spot to me, but it's not a really great matchup for Jordan Mason. You can see middling matchup for Cleveland running backs. Worst matchup out there for running backs against the Browns. So I guess I understated it, how bad of a matchup this is for Jordan Mason. Really, really tough one here. So might have trouble getting things going. But even in that game where things didn't really go Jordan Mason's way, he still had 16 carries. So you would expect him to have a pretty good workload. I think he has 16 carries and 3 targets in the game. So 19 touches in that game where the Vikings got behind and were behind the entire game. So I would expect if the Vikings can take a lead, which maybe they can against the Browns, probably in a better situation to do well here against the Browns. They are favored. I think Jordan Mason probably gets more of the workload. Yeah, Vikings favored by 3.5. Total of just 36 in this one. This is man, not expected to be a very fun game. I think Jordan Mason seems good at 10,400. Wish he was more involved in the passing game, but again, we saw 3 targets last week. I think I prefer him to Carson Wentz. He is 1,400 more expensive, but we've got some pay down options. And then Xavier Scott, honestly, 3,400 for a guy who just saw 8 targets last week, seems fine. I would say this is sort of like a Derrick Henry, Justice Hill situation where I think it's going to be pretty game script dependent. They're probably negatively correlated, but we looked at it in the past that there were some games where both Justice Hill and Derrick Henry got there last year for their relative salaries. So I think it's possible for Jordan Mason and Xavier Scott to both have good games. Last week if Jordan Mason had just scored the touchdown instead of Xavier Scott, I think that would have been an example of a game where you probably want both of them on a showdown slate. So I think both are independently pretty good options. And I think they're okay to play together. They're not like 2 running backs that I love playing together, like we've seen with the Broncos the other week. Like I love that against the Bengals because you could just see a scenario where they're just running all over them and both running backs can get involved. I think this is one where they each kind of have their own role, so they're set up to succeed in different environments. So they can succeed together. It's probably not going to happen as often as some other running back situations, but both independently, I think are pretty strong plays here. Cam Akers, I don't believe, got into the game. Yeah, did not get into the game in week 4 for any offensive snaps. I mean, he's 400. If he's active, you can consider throwing him in there and hope that he gets there in garbage time or something, but certainly not a priority. And then on the Cleveland side, Quinshon Judkins has just completely taken over this backfield. Took no time for him to just take the entire backfield over. Last week, 21 carries for Judkins, 1 for Dylan Sampson, 1 for Jerome Ford, 4 targets on 34% route participation for Judkins, 1 for Sampson, 2 for Ford. Judkins looks like a really strong player. He's looked really good. He has had, again, this is not a great matchup for running backs against Minnesota, but it's actually not terrible either. It's kind of middle of the pack so far. And I've attributed this in the past to, I think the Vikings just, and look at this, as far as rushing goes, I think the Vikings just get worn down because their offense has just not been able to sustain drives. So then the defense gets worn down and then teams are able to run on them. But it continued last week with Kenneth Gainwell. They just, every week, they look like they're just defeated out there. And Judkins has been pretty good against the Packers and the Lions, who both have elite run defenses. So I think if you can do well against the Packers and the Lions, I think the Vikings are beatable as well. Yeah, Packers here, bottom 10 matchup. Detroit, yeah, bottom 6. So it's actually a relatively strong matchup for Judkins relative to his recent matchups. The workload is just too good. So Judkins at 9,800, definitely a priority here. He's getting the ownership, 39% flex ownership, 25% captain ownership. I think this is a game to target the running backs. But yeah, Judkins is cheaper than Mason in probably a better spot. So I think Judkins looks like a really strong play here. I don't think he gets game scripted out. I think even if they get behind, they're just leaning on Judkins the whole way. Yeah, Zane, last week was so not fun as a Vikings fan. That was as little fun as you could have. Watching the guy that they decided not to sign just destroy them. Jerome Ford played 16 snaps last week. Dylan Sampson 9. Both had 1 rushing attempt, 2 targets on 26% route participation for Ford, 1 on 16% for Dylan Sampson. Neither of them is particularly exciting here, just given that I don't think you can expect much of a workload. I think I would prefer Ford if I'm going to play one of them, just because again he ran 26% of the routes last week. We can look at on the season. I mean, let's look at the last 2 weeks maybe. Let me just pull up week 3. Was it any better? I mean, I think it was already just mostly, yeah, just Judkins, 18 carries. It was again Jerome Ford running 29% of the routes and did see 4 targets in that game. So I think Ford, has that pass catching upside. Sampson, they're just not really using. So I think Ford is like an okay option at 2,400. I would prefer Xavier Scott, but Xavier Scott also getting more ownership. I don't really think you need to go to Sampson at 1,400. Just not really involved since Judkins took over. So yeah, maybe you can play some Ford, but at 7%, maybe honestly I might come in a little bit over that just because of that. He had 4 targets. Maybe if they get behind, he plays a little bit more than he has the past couple of weeks. Maybe he sees 6 targets, and at 2,400 he catches 5 of them for 30 yards, and maybe that's enough in this game where we don't have that many like super strong options. And if he scores a touchdown, you probably do want him on top of a few catches. So yeah, I think Ford is honestly, yeah, probably a strong play. Probably somebody that I want to be slightly overweight on 7%, because that's just a low ownership number on Ford. Not going to any Raheem Sanders again. I don't know that I get to Dylan Sampson. Just not really involved. Let's move on to wide receivers. Yeah, Judkins captain. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, does make a lot of sense. Wide receivers on the Viking side. So we only have one game with Jordan Addison with the team. They kind of made it sound like they were going to work him in slowly, like, oh yeah, we're not going to have him play 90 snaps right away. And then in that first game, 91% route participation. It was just a big lie that they were going to work him in slowly. It was Justin Jefferson in that last game, 96.3% route participation. Jordan Addison, 90.1. So we got clarity on, first of all, they are willing to use Jordan Addison immediately, but then also on the wide receiver 3 situation, I wasn't really sure whether it was going to be Thielen or Naylor after Addison and Jefferson. I thought it's possible they brought Thielen back. They want to use him, but it was Naylor that they much preferred over Thielen in that game. Naylor saw 4 targets. I believe, if I'm remembering right, I believe he had 3 consecutive targets in the end zone when the Vikings were like on the 1 yard line. They just kept going back to Jalen Naylor for reasons that didn't make sense to me, but he did end up scoring a touchdown. So I guess kudos to them. But Justin Jefferson, again, we don't have a ton of great spend up options on the slate. Looks like we do still have some decent value across the board. Jefferson looks like a really strong play. 19% captain ownership seems about right. I don't think I get really on top of that number, but that seems okay. 39% flex ownership. Yeah, I think Justin Jefferson in about 50% of lineups seems right. It's tough to play him in a ton more at his salary. If I get to more, I don't think I'm going to be upset about it. I think I would like to take all of the get all the shares that I can of Justin Jefferson, but I don't know how easy that's going to be because we don't have a ton of like super great value. We've got a lot of kind of middle range value. Jordan Addison, again, awesome roll immediately. He's 8,400. Looks like a pretty strong option. Jordan Addison captain at 2%. That looks amazing. I definitely want to have more than 2% of Jordan Addison at captain. 27% flex. Yeah, he looks like a great contrarian, like relatively contrarian option at 27 and 2, just a little bit under owned. So like Jordan Addison quite a bit. And then Jalen Naylor. Yeah, I love that at 3,600, 7% projected ownership. Again, he was the pretty clear wide receiver 3 last week, 55.6% route participation. Saw 4 targets in that game. Want to look at slot participation. 73.3. So he was just the like clear slot receiver for the Vikings. I guess Thielen also 75%, but it was like Naylor was a starting slot. Thielen was the backup slot in that game. We can look at schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed for receivers. Where are we? Right in the middle of the pack for receivers against this Cleveland defense. Doesn't seem like any individual receiver spot stands out as a great matchup. They're all kind of like slightly negative. Yeah, looks okay for Vikings receivers. We can look at the wide receiver cornerback matchup report. Greg Newsome on Justin Jefferson, Denzel Ward on Jordan Addison, Miles Harden on Jalen Naylor. So far this year, they've actually been positive matchups across the board for receivers against this trio. Yeah, I think all three look pretty good individually. I think you can stack it up with Carson Wentz at captain. A lot of ways to play it, but I think the Vikings receivers all look pretty good. Thielen, last week I liked him because I thought he might take on, kind of split that third receiver role and might be a little bit more involved. And they were talking about limited Addison. It's a little bit tough to go back there with any enthusiasm after what we saw from Thielen last week. Just 22% route participation, 2 targets. They could target him. You could score a touchdown, and maybe you'll want him, but he's still 3,000. That's not even necessarily enough that you would want to have Thielen, even if he scores a touchdown at 3,000. So tough ask. Well, I mean, 1% ownership. I'll have more than 1% of Thielen. Not a priority, but I'd like to get to 5%. If he's going to be 1%, maybe I want to get to 8%. I don't know. I think I want to be certainly over that number. I'd be kind of surprised if he is really 1%, but at 3,000, he's not like, it's not easy to see him paying off this salary. It would take more than just a touchdown, more than just a short touchdown at least. But at 1%, I think he's a better bet than that. Not getting to Ty Felton, Miles Price, anybody else here. Again, we can look at it. Yeah, didn't even run any routes last week. And then the Cleveland side, this will be interesting to look at. With Cedric Tillman out, Isaiah Bond already kind of ascending. We've got Jerry Jeudy is 7,600, projected for 30 and 4% at captain ownership. Isaiah Bond 5,200, 16 and 1. Jamari Thrash 2,000, 1 and 0. And then you've got Malachi Corley, Gage Larvadane, both at 200. That's a name I don't know. I'll just tell you that I don't know who Gage Larvadane is. This is the first time I've seen that name. DeAndre Carter, Cedric Tillman out. So let's take a look at last week here. So Tillman played 24% ran 24% of the routes last week. So we saw a little bit of a boost for Isaiah Bond, I think, already. But last week it was 87% route participation for Jeudy, 9 targets, 71% for Bond, 6 targets. Thrash at 29%, 0 targets. And then, those are the only receivers. If we look at weekly route share report for the Browns, Bond already ascending. So I don't know to what extent he got more because of the Tillman injury, or if this is just where he was going to be regardless. But I think we probably see Bond move up, continue in that direction. I think Thrash. So again, Jamari Thrash, we haven't seen any kind of increase in route participation. We didn't really see it last week with Tillman out, but maybe we see Thrash run a little bit more. I don't know. It's not promising that he didn't actually see any increase with Tillman out. Let's take a look at where they're lining up. Tillman 55 out wide, 44% in the. So I mean, Thrash like the exact same routes as Tillman. I guess that's just last week. Let's look for the full season. All right, so on the season, 70% out wide for Cedric Tillman. Thrash more in the slot. Bond a little bit more out wide. So we could see some benefit to all the receivers not named Jeudy. Jeudy already had his role, going to keep that role. I think Bond looks pretty good as the wide receiver 2 at 5,200. Not getting a ton of ownership. Talented rookie. I think he's and only getting 16% of ownership. I think Bond actually looks like a really strong mid-range play. Again in week 4. How many targets do we see here? 6 targets last week. On the season, 13 targets on on 46% route participation. So as the route participation comes up, I think we continue to see, a handful of targets every game, and maybe more with Tillman out. Tillman was a pretty good target earner also. So I think Bond looks like a strong play. Thrash, honestly, at 2,000, I prefer that over Adam Thielen because he's cheaper than Thielen, and it'd be less surprising to see him take on a bigger role with Cedric Tillman out. So I think I like the receivers in this game, I guess, across the board, but particularly do like Thrash better than Thielen. I don't know that I like him better than Naylor, but he is cheaper and getting less ownership, so it's kind of close there. And then, I don't know that I'm going to get to Malachi Corley, Greg Gage, Larvadain. Don't think you need to get to either of those two. But yeah, I like the primary three a bit. Let's take a look at tight ends because it's kind of an interesting game for tight ends across the board. Well, let me check in on chat. What's up, JT? Larvadain was good in college. Okay. Gajeski knows. I'm sure Gajeski knows about Larvadain. No doubt about that. Tight ends. TJ Hawkinson, 6,800, projected for just 17 and 1% ownership. Again, let's start by taking a look at schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed. Tough matchup for Hawkinson against Cleveland. Sort of tough matchup for Cleveland tight ends against Minnesota as well. But again, these are not huge numbers that it's overly concerning for me. Sometimes if there are outliers, I'll factor this in and find a spot I really like, especially if I already like the spot. I'll justify it to myself to like it even better. But I don't think these numbers, negative 0.7 schedule adjusted fantasy points per game, not super scary to me. Negative 4.5. That is actually a number that I don't love there. But it's a showdown slate, so I'm probably not going to let it scare me off Hawkinson too much when he's only getting 17% ownership at 6,800. I don't know that I get really much more than 17% of Hawk because he's pretty expensive relative to, again, we have Isaiah Bond at 5,200, just way cheaper and, probably has a better role than Hawkinson. So I don't actually think he's like a big priority, but at 17%, I think I probably at least get there, get with the field, and then I'll probably have more than 1% at captain of Hawkinson. I do think he'll have his spike weeks this year. Seems as good a spot as any to have one. Josh Oliver, I don't know that I get to a ton of Josh Oliver. In week 4, just 11% route participation for Oliver, 81% for Hawk. So that's actually promising. 81.5% route participation with 5 targets in the game. That's not a bad role for Hawkinson. Adonai Mitchell going to be active, but play a limited role tomorrow. Yeah, I think I'll have, maybe 20% Hawkinson, something like that, or 20% and 3 or 4% at captain. I think seems about right for Hawkinson. Like clearly has upside, given his route participation, his involvement in the offense. We haven't really seen it much outside of that Cincinnati game, which was just a funnel for tight ends. But I think he's a fine play at 6,800, not a big priority. Oliver at 2% ownership. 11. You're just hoping for a touchdown. That's all you really want, but not a priority by any means. Now Cleveland, I want to take a look at the route participation for Harold Fannin in particular. 60% to 57% to 47%, back up to 60.5% last week. So that is promising that we saw a little bit of a jump in route participation for Harold Fannin in that game. David Njoku, 79, 72, 74, 68. Let's take a look at the targets. Last week for the Browns, Harold Fannin, 6 targets. David Njoku, 3 targets. I think both involved enough, and like they've kind of schemed to get Harold Fannin the ball. So at a price tag of 4,400, again, I actually think he's a better play than Hawkinson, just given the price tag and the involvement, the way they try to scheme to get him the ball. And Njoku at 4,600. Honestly, both pretty similar here, but Njoku getting more ownership and more expensive. I think I have a slight preference for Fannin. So if I'm ranking the tight ends, I think I would rank them Fannin, Njoku, Actually, at this ownership, it's probably Hawkinson for GPPs ahead of Njoku. So probably be Fannin, then Hawkinson, then Njoku, then Oliver, and then probably nobody else for me. I mean, Whitehead's 200, so I guess you can throw him in there. He did run. He had one target last week on 4 routes. If he scores a touchdown at 200, there's a good chance you want him in your lineup. So I think Whitehead is actually a pretty viable tight end. Also, defenses and kickers. Will Reichard, 5,400. Vikings defense, 5,800. Look at that ownership, 28-2 for Will Reichard, 33-3 for the Vikings defense. I was ready to say I really like the Vikings defense going up against, again, we're getting a rookie quarterback in Dylan Gabriel in his first NFL start, and it's in London. So that's a lot of things that are kind of probably a situation, clearly a situation that he has never seen before. A lot being thrown at him, and it's not like this is a quarterback who had a ton of pedigree coming in. So this is kind of a big ask for Dylan Gabriel to start this game. So, and against a really good Vikings defense, a really tough spot for Dylan Gabriel. I really do like the Vikings defense here. I don't know that I like them better than the 36% ownership they're getting, especially at 5,800. And then you have Andre Smite. Correct me on that. 15-1 at 5,000. Seems fine for a kicker. I don't know. I don't know much about him. Those seem like okay numbers for a kicker. Does not have a great projection. Browns defense also looks great. They're only 4,000 going up against Carson Wentz, 38.4% though. So like the Vikings, just both of these defenses look really good at their price tags, and they're just getting a ton of ownership. So I don't know that I'm really prioritizing them any more than the ownerships they're already getting there. Is Gabriel any good? Your guess is as good as mine. I'm not really expecting him to be great. This is also true. Good point by Neil. Says Hawkinson going to have to stay in and block a lot with this beat up offensive line. Yeah, the Vikings offensive line, for anybody who doesn't know, is just completely broken. Let me read off the tweet, or just like a caption from an article today. I guess maybe it came out yesterday. The Vikings on Friday ruled out starting center Ryan Kelly with a concussion, backup center Michael Juergens with a hamstring, right tackle Brian O'Neill with a knee injury, and left guard Donovan Jackson with a wrist injury. As a result, they will move guard Blake Brandel, who would have started for Jackson, to center, a position Brandel said earlier this week that he has never played in a game. So they're missing all four offensive linemen here, moving guys around. It is rough out there for Vikings offensive linemen, which actually does, probably hurt TJ Hawkinson, because he probably will need to be just blocking more. Anything else on defenses, kickers? I don't really think anything else. But yeah, is Gabriel any good? I don't really think so. It's not my expectation that he's going to be good. He was drafted ahead of Shedeur Sanders, so maybe he's better than I think he is. But I think most people thought they drafted Gabriel and then they got their better quarterback later on, who just nobody apparently wants on their team. I don't know. I don't watch college football. Anybody in chat can share their opinions. I don't think you can often tell with other than like clear stars. It's kind of tough to tell how quarterbacks are going to transition to the NFL. But I don't think there are really high expectations for Dylan Gabriel. He was not like a first round draft pick. He was, I want to say, a fourth round draft pick or something like that. Actually, let me look that up. Not one of the first quarterbacks taken in this draft. Pick 94. So I guess that's third round. Yeah, third round, near the end of the third round of the NFL draft. And his college career, several FBS records, including total touchdowns and career passing touchdowns, which he tied. So, I guess he played well in college, but again, was a late third round pick, which usually does not translate well to the NFL. Like generally, teams really want to take shots on quarterbacks, so they're willing to spend up in the first round on quarterbacks who have any shot at being great typically. So usually, you're not expecting much from a third round pick in the NFL. But who knows? He could surprise us, or he could be, also a flash in the pan. He could just be good out to start, and then teams kind of figure him out. You never really know. Start Browns defense or Texans defense versus the Ravens in season long. I think it is. That's really tough because the Texans have really good defense too. It's probably the Browns though for me. I mean, this game is a 36 total. Uh, let's run some sims. Again, I have not even entered any contests yet, but I'm going to enter some. In the meantime, I'm going to run some sims. I'm going to change the settings to 15,000 lineups, 15,000 field, 10,000 sims, top heavy contest, shady portfolio diversifier. You can use promo code Neil to get 10% off on your first payment on any Run the Sims product, by the way. And by the way, if you haven't already done so, please do like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Trying to get to 6,000 by the end of the NFL season. Could use your support. Have a long way to go there. All right, the Sims are running. You guys excited for this game? I mean, I'm going to play it. I'm going to watch it. I'm not excited for it. If anything happens in this game that brings me joy, I will be pleasantly surprised. A Jordan Mason touchdown, I will be pleasantly surprised. I have such low expectations for this game. Because I also like best ball. I've got a million shares of Jordan Mason, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. I'm all over this Vikings team. And then last week it was Jalen Naylor scoring touchdowns, and just all the players that were not even like considerations in best ball season were scoring all the touchdowns last year. Calculating payouts. $8:30 a.m. Central Time. That's just too early for football. And last week I actually had to wake up because, surprisingly, Jaylen Warren was inactive after they made it sound like he was going to play. Let's see. Man, the mini max is pretty small for this one. Only 20,000 total prizes. 2,000 to first, so you better hope you win it solo. Which may be possible on a slate like this. Not a super obvious one. Yeah, agreed, Zane. I thought for sure he was in. Oh no, M. Wald. I mean, all indications were that Jaylen Warren was going to be playing. Like, I think they might have even said he was going to play in that game. And then, I woke up and I woke up like 7 minutes before inactives were going to come out with plans to continue sleeping. And then because I was up, I was like, I guess I'll stay up until inactives come out just to make sure, and then I can go back to bed until my alarm. And then, of course, Jaylen Warren a surprise inactive, so I had to hustle out of bed to redo my lineups. I changed the title and description of the video I did last week, this video, but I changed it all to be like Jaylen Warren out to let people know. But yeah, that was a brutal one. All right, top lineup here: Quinshon Judkins, captain with Cleveland Browns, Dylan Gabriel, Dylan Sampson, Jordan Mason, Justin Jefferson. Interestingly, so we've got Dylan Gabriel not unstacked, but stacked with Dylan Sampson and Quinshon Judkins only, so not like really stacked with a receiver, which, again, not really the way I was planning on playing it. Also was not planning on playing a ton of Dylan Sampson, and he makes it into the top lineup here. So we're going to have to take a look at my exposures. Second lineup, we have Carson Wentz triple stacked with Jalen Naylor, Jordan Addison, and Justin Jefferson. I love that one. And then you've got Dylan Gabriel and Harold Fannin coming back from the Browns. Third lineup, Jordan Mason, Vikings defense, Will Reichard. That all looks great. Leaves 3,200 on the table. On the other side, we have Dylan Gabriel, Harold Fannin, Jerry Jeudy. Kind of love that lineup. Jordan Mason, Vikings defense, Will Reichard, Dylan Gabriel, Harold Fannin, Jerry Jeudy. Like, this is a lineup that tells a story of the Vikings getting up, holding the lead with Jordan Mason pounding it, and the Vikings being great, and then the Browns having to throw quite a bit toward the end. Maybe Dylan Gabriel throws for one touchdown, and then Harold Fannin and Jeudy both racking up PPR points, but leaves 3,200 on the table, and you can clearly see how that lineup would win. Obviously doesn't have Jefferson or Addison, so you can also see pretty easily how that lineup could score you $0 and be toward the bottom of the contest. but kind of an interesting one. Fourth lineup, we got Jordan Addison, Carson Wentz, Jalen Naylor, Justin Jefferson, Quinshon Judkins, and Xavier Scott in it. So that one has Scott, but no Jordan Mason. Do we have any here where they're in the same lineup together? I don't think I'm seeing any with Mason and Scott in them. Yeah, not really seeing any with both of them together. Again, I think it's viable, but unlikely. Not like they are pretty, I think, negatively correlated. Interesting. All right, let's take a look at exposures. Quarterback, we're getting to 69% Carson Wentz, 5% at captain, 54% Dylan Gabriel, 7% at captain. So a lot of both quarterbacks. Seems about right. We don't have a ton of pay up options here. Running backs, only getting to 60% of Quinshon Judkins. I think he looks like a great play. 11% of captain. Kind of surprised I'm not getting more. Also not getting to a ton of Jordan Mason, 31% and 16.5% of captain. I think both look great. None of these numbers so far look so far off that I'm like, oh, these are, I need to fix these. Like they mostly look okay to me. Xavier Scott, 10%. Dylan Sampson, I'm a little bit surprised to see them getting to 15% Dylan Sampson at 1,400, but projected for just 1% flex ownership. So I think that kind of makes sense. I guess more surprised that I'm getting to 15% Dylan Sampson and none of Jerome Ford. But I think it comes down to the ownership projections. 7% to Ford, 1% to Dylan Sampson. Gonna cause that disparity where Sampson actually looks better in GPPs. Not totally sure I buy it. I might want to adjust that a little bit to get to more Ford and a little bit less Sampson. But yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense. If Sampson is 1% owned, then he clearly has some ability to put up points. He could be the third down back when they could switch things up a little bit, but he was not very involved last week. And Ford, I think, has a better shot at putting up fantasy points. So that's what I might want to change just a little bit. Wide receivers, 43.5% Justin Jefferson, 19% at captain. Jordan Addison, 20% flex, 26% captain. I mean, yeah, Jordan Addison projects for just 2% captain. And as I said, I think that looks awesome. Apparently, really awesome, 26%. Jerry Jeudy just getting to 14 and 1%. I think Jeudy could be more targeted here with Cedric Tillman out. So I like him better than 15%. Isaiah Bond, 16 and 3%. I think we're getting a big dock on the Cleveland receivers because of Dylan Gabriel, which is probably fair, but also I think I like them better than this. So I think I'd want a little bit more of Jeudy and Bond, just given their increased roles with no Cedric Tillman. Naylor, I like quite a bit, 18.6 and 2.2%. Surprisingly, getting to 9.8% Jamari Thrash and 8.8% of Gage Larvadane. So apparently the Sims think that Larvadane might become more of a thing with no Cedric Tillman. Getting a 3% Adam Thielen, 0.3% Malachi Corley. At tight end, we are getting to 43% Harold Fannin plus 5% at captain, 15.4% TJ Hawkinson, 0.7% at captain, 7.7% Njoku, 0.3 Oliver, 0.7% Blake Whiteheart. Love to see that I'm getting that much Fannin. A little bit of a scary fade on Hawk and Njoku to this extent. I think I'd like a little bit more Njoku, but that 30% ownership does not appeal that much. Kickers, we're getting to 16% Will Reichard, 1% Andre Smite. Defense, we're even with the high projected ownership, getting to 32% Browns with 1 at captain, 21% Vikings with 2 at captain. So even with relatively high projected ownerships here, defense is looking pretty strong. All right, let's see. Oh, that's interesting. Emerald thinks that it's too evenly split in the receiving back workload. So I'll make some adjustments here. I'm gonna run the Sims one more time. I'm not gonna keep doing it. I'm trying to keep this show relatively short because it is late at night. But I'm gonna make a few adjustments here because there are things that I probably like a little bit better than what I'm getting to. So I'll start. I'm gonna go to the splits, or sorry, the inputs. On the Viking side, was getting to a fair amount of Jordan Mason. I think 10% Xavier Scott. No real issue with those. Was I getting to a lot of Jefferson? No, I know I was getting to a lot of Addison Captain, which I loved. I don't know that I was getting to, how much Jefferson was I getting? Yeah, fair amount, 62% Jefferson. So that actually looks really good to me. I don't really want to lose the Vikings exposure I'm getting right now by upping the Browns. I do worry that I'm going to have that effect when I change things for some of the Browns, but we'll see. I think they all look great. Wasn't getting to much Hawk, which a little bit of a scary fade, but honestly not that much of a worry. He is 6,800, a little bit too expensive, and just 1% at captain. So I think I'll get to a little bit of Hawk at captain, and that's where I want to make my bet. I think if he goes off, he'll go off in a big way at 1% captain ownership. I was getting to a fair amount of Dylan Gabriel, surprisingly not getting to much of his receivers. So that might be, I might want to increase their target shares a little bit, and increase the pass rate. So I don't really want to decrease my Quinshon Judkins. Let me look at that again, because I do think Judkins is a pretty fantastic play here. Yeah, I'm getting to 60%. So more in the flex, less in the captain than projected. Let's see. So we've got this split as Samson 8, Ford 6 in terms of rushing market share, and then split in terms of the receiving. Yeah, I don't think I agree with that. So I'm going to make some adjustments here. I'm going to click the smart adjust, and I'm going to move Jerome Ford up to 9% receiving market share, and Samson down to 2%. I'm going to click normalize. Perfect. And then to Samson, I mean, they don't even have different receiving roles. So I'm actually going to move Ford up to 8% there also and normalize. There we go. Isaiah Bond, I'm going to move up a little bit in terms of his target share, because I think he might take on more of Cedric Tillman's work. I'm going to get rid of Malachi Corley here. He is 200, so like he's kind of viable, but I think I'm just going to cut him out of my player pool and just give that directly to Isaiah Bond and Jamari Thrash. Move them both up a little bit. I was also not getting to much of Jerry Jeudy. What else can I do here? I guess I can just, again, move the rush rate down slightly. I'm going to move that down to 45%. So maybe that's enough to get to a little bit more of the receivers there on the Browns. Let's try that. Let's see what that does. Yeah, I think playing both defenses pretty strong. They're both getting ownership, so it's not like super sneaky play, but I think they're both totally viable on this slate. Wait, Run the Sims isn't projecting Judkins for 6 fantasy points. They've got a fairly high projection on Judkins. So I'm not sure what you're referring to. Calculating payouts. By the way, if you're not already in the Flannelverse Discord, it is free to join. There's a link in the description of this video. So far on the season, Browns have allowed just 222.5 defensive yards per game on average. Vikings at 281.8. Yeah, neither have allowed much to the passing game either. Browns have allowed, interesting. So this is why maybe they're referred to as a pass funnel. Browns have allowed 152.3 pass yards per game on average. That's really low. But then 8 passing touchdowns. That's kind of interesting. All right, diversifying payouts. Maybe I'll build a lineup real quick after we do this. Just hand build one, just for the fun of it. Top lineup: Jordan Addison, Carson Wentz, Cleveland Browns, Dylan Gabriel, Harold Fannin, Justin Jefferson. Second lineup leaves a lot of salary, 4,200 on the table. It's a Dylan Gabriel mega stack. Gabriel at captain with Harold Fannin, Isaiah Bond, and Quinshon Judkins. Cleveland Browns defense and Jordan Mason. So this is a lineup that'll do well if the Browns just dominate. Third lineup: Jordan Addison, Carson Wentz, Cleveland Browns, Justin Jefferson, Minnesota Vikings, TJ Hawkinson. Fourth lineup, again, leaving a ton of salary on the table. It is a onslaught Gabriel captain, Njoku, Fannin, Bond, Judy, Jordan Mason. So some interesting lineups here at the top. Looking at player exposures, we're at 63 and 4% of Carson Wentz, 53 and 18% of Dylan Gabriel. So getting to a lot of these passing games after I made some adjustments there. 49 and 7% of Judkins, 39 and 10% of Mason. So I don't know if I love that I moved away from the running backs to this extent, down to just 5% Xavier Scott. I think I want to be higher than that, but I'm up to 8% Jerome Ford, 3% Dylan Sampson. That looks a little bit better to me. Wide receiver, we're at about 50%, 51% Justin Jefferson, 25 and 20% Jordan Addison. So a little bit less at captain here, but still getting to a fair amount there. Judy, 20% and 0.5% at captain. Bond, 29% at 5% at captain now. Jalen Naylor, 15 and 1.5%. Thrash, 13.3%. Gage Larvadane, 5%. And none of Adam Thielen now. So I might want to adjust to get to a little bit of Thielen. Tight end, we're getting to still a little over 50, or right around 50% of Harold Fannin, 10 and 1% of Hawkinson, only 1% of captain. So even with the projected just 1% captain ownership, I think I'd try to get to a little bit more Hawkinson there. 9.5% Njoku, none of Oliver, 0.6% Blake Whitehead. At kicker, we're getting to 20.4% Will Reichard, none of Andre Smite. And defense, we're getting to 37 and 3 of the Browns, 20 and 0 of the Vikings. Honestly, the Vikings are expensive, but I might want to get to a little bit more there. I think I'm not getting it much because of the ownership projection. I wonder if they actually come in a little bit lighter than projected because of how expensive they are and because people want to play Bond. Yeah, I think Bond looks pretty good, honestly. He actually didn't come out that great in the Sims the first time I ran it, but I think he's actually a fairly strong play. Because we could just see him kind of take on the full Cedric Tillman role and maybe even more for all we know. So I think there's big upside on Isaiah Bond here. Yeah, I also kind of like the double defense lineups. All right, I think I'm gonna stop there. Oh yeah, I'm gonna build one lineup real quick. So let's just build one on DraftKings. Hand build it. Where's Showdown? There we go. Where's the enter button? Draft team. There we go. All right. What do I want at captain? Do I want to try Justin Jefferson captain lineup or Jordan Addison? Addison's more easier to get there. So I'm just going to go with some of my favorites. Addison, Mason, Judkins. Can we do it with Justin Jefferson? I don't even know if that's possible. Yeah, let's go Jefferson and no Wentz. So now we have 2,900 left per player. This is why Gage Larvadane starts to appeal. Let's go Jamari Thrash. Ooh, and Jalen Naylor. Get to all the Vikings receivers. Is that how I want to play it, though? Like, that looks okay to me, but you're getting to all 3 of the Vikings starting receivers without Carson Wentz. So maybe in this one you move off of Mason to Carson Wentz. Like it's possible because it is PPR, but it's a little bit thin, I think. So let's go. There we go. I also don't totally love having Addison in the captain spot with multiple pass catchers, but I think it's okay. Multiple pass catchers in the flex. Yeah, there you go. Jordan Addison at captain, Carson Wentz, Quinshon Judkins, Justin Jefferson. I'm talking like the announcer last week was calling him Jordan Jefferson. Jamari Thrash and Jalen Naylor. I think that looks okay. Leave 1,600 on the table, so might be a little bit less likely to be duped. Let's do another one though. Let's do a Vikings dominant lineup. Let's do this is Neil's dream lineup. So we're gonna go Jordan Mason. No, I don't think we can do that. We're gonna go Vikings defense at captain. Then we're gonna go Jordan Mason, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Judkins being the only player who does anything for the Browns. Then you've got 1,300 left over. And it's gross. Bet on a Larvadana or Corley, I guess, to get one catch. Blake Whiteheart. All right, this got tough. Let's see. Maybe instead of Addison, we go with Fannin and a Bond. That's not really a Vikings dominate lineup, though. I do like Fannin quite a bit. Don't think we want to get away. I guess we get away from Judkins because maybe they start passing more. So then maybe at that point they go to start throwing to Judy or Bond. Let's go Bond. Oh, we're back to fitting Judkins in there. I mean, that one, it uses the full salary. So this one will be duped. So I don't love that. Maybe we could actually go, instead of Bond, we go to could go like Njoku, but I was thinking Browns defense. Yeah, there you go. Leave 1,300. Vikings captain, Jordan Mason, Justin Jefferson, Harold Fannin, Browns defense, and Quinshon Judkins. I think that looks okay. All right. I think that's going to do it for this video. Please do like the video if you haven't already done so. Subscribe to the channel. I do have multiple videos out here on the main slate for tomorrow as well on how I'm using Run the Sims, one for DraftKings, one for FanDuel. You can check those out if you have not already done so. Make sure if you sign up for Run the Sims that you use promo code Neil to get 10% off your first payment and support me. Thank you guys very much. Let's win some money tomorrow. Good luck, everybody. And of course, Skol Vikings.